Hey everybody, this is Rob from Frontline Mindset with National Fire Radio. Today, National Fire Radio is taking one of those turns with Frontline Mindset where we become international because I have Steve Aslin here with me. He's a retired firefighter from the London Fire Brigade. Steve's got an amazing story that we're going to drive into on Frontline Mindset. He has a tremendous career with the London Fire Brigade. He's one of the responders who went for the Grenfell Tower, which is kind of the catalyst of not an incident, but an event that he's going to be taking place here in the United States, where he's going to be biking across the world. And we're going to dive into all of this. So, Steve, thank you for coming on the podcast today. I appreciate it. And shout out to our friend Billy, who made this arrangement. I mean, he's a rock star in his own mind there, and I appreciate him for and our friendship that we've had for all these years.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity for me to come on the podcast today. And Billy, or leading firefighter meaning, is a legend. I can guarantee that, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm going to sneak him into the country one day. He thinks that it's not going to happen, but I'm going to totally do it. All right, so Steve, let's start with your journey in the fire service. Like how did you find the fire service? Because I know in the United States it's very common for members to volunteer in a local fire department and start that way, or just see recruitment stuff like that. How did it work for you in England?
Yeah, I remember I did apply to London Fire Brigade. I got to interview stage when I was younger. I think it was sort of like 18 years old. I've always had this desire to kind of want to help people. I did a bit of lifeguarding as well, so I've always had that drive. And then I kind of felt as I needed to kind of boost my education, so I went down the sort of college route and got myself educated. And when I came out, everything continued to point towards wanting to help people out, really. So I applied to fire brigades around the London area because they weren't recruiting at the time. I managed to get into East Sussex Fire Brigade, which is, if you want to know a little bit of the geography, which is in the south coast of England, really. So my first posting after my training upfield was at Hove Fire Station, which is next to Brighton. And then I passed a couple of exams quite early, my leading firefighter exams. I did a bit of temporary work both at Preston Circus, which is in the middle of Brighton, which serves a city, and then Rodine, which is a marina just outside Brighton. So yeah, that was kind of the initial part of my career, really.
When in that initial part of your career, we talk about remembering your first fire and stuff like that. Like when you figured out, I know we used the term when you got the bug. Like, when was it that you realized you arrived? Like, was it that first fire that you had, that first ride on the engine or on the appliance, as you guys say? Like, what was the moment where you were like, this is what I'm where I'm supposed to be?
That's a really, really good question. Because when I was in London, I was in training for 5 years, and I talk about this to the recruits or the trainees, and I say you've got the uniform and you've passed the process and you're in training, and you tell all your friends you're you're a firefighter in London Fire Brigade, but it's not real. The penny hasn't dropped, and I'd say things like, you're there when normally you're walking down the road on a Saturday night in your finery looking smart, and something happens, and normally when you're a non-firefighter or operational personnel, you tend to bypass it and give the responsibility to somebody else. But when you're in the fire service, you actually do something to help out, and that might mean that you have to get your knees dirty or your elbows dirty and stuff like that. Now, that happens, that penny drops at a different time for different people, right? And it just doesn't happen overnight. Just because you got the uniform or you're wearing a t-shirt, it doesn't happen. And so I think what's really valuable here is the station you're at, the experience you get, but more importantly, I think your work colleagues. And they're the ones that really enhance you as an individual. And that's something that I was very, very fortunate. My very first watch was the White Watch at Hove. Really good experienced people. The banter was fierce, but they were extremely supportive, and I just felt like I was embraced as part of that team, which is really important, I think, in industry, but particularly in what we do, because without
Yeah.
that, we're struggling. So yeah, I just felt very, very early on they were really helping me a lot, and I just felt very quickly I felt part of the team, and then like within a very short period of time, I felt authentic, which I think is quite important, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I was at Hogue, I think the most significant incident for me was there was an abandoned call at about 3 o'clock in the morning,
Okay.
and both the appliances kind of went, and we kind of thought, oh, it's just going to be a false alarm, or it's going to be a malicious call or something like that. And actually, when we turned around the corner, there was smoke billowing out of the top two windows, and we all could hear some shouting and screaming. And we pitched it was only on the first floor, but we pitched the ladder up, and I was the only one available. So I'd gone up, and when I got to the window, there was this grandmother that was at the window. And I said, just get on, I'll carry you down. And she says, no, my granddaughter's at the next window. You saved her before you saved me. And I said, I haven't got time. She goes, I don't care. Save her now. So we had to re-pitch this ladder, which didn't take long because it was only a triple extension ladder. And I went up and got her. And then my expectation was when we got to the grandmother, she wouldn't be there. We'd have to sort of reach into the window and grab her down, but she was still there. But you couldn't see that. You couldn't see them through the window. The smoke was billowing out so much. So I did 2 live carry downs, and the smoke was so fierce. They came and did a bit of community safety, and we talked about the importance of smoke alarms because their batteries had run out, and they still had like smoke sort of impregnated into their skin, in their ears. And this was like 5-6 days afterwards.
Yeah.
And for me, I can significantly remember the impact it had on me actually on the fireground. That I had this adrenaline was not just pumping through my body, but I just felt I knew I'd done something very, very significant. And that was probably after about 4 years of me being on this particular watch. And for me, I think that was a real turning point for me.
What? Do you remember? Was that your first fire, or what was your first fire like?
There'd been several fires.
Yeah,
but I think the way the jobs were allocated, like I was the only one available to go up and call them down. So it was the kind of the role I had within the incident as well. That kind of was like I've done something right here, and it's like you train for these moments.
Yep.
But when you're put in that situation, you're not able to do it. Like you get this real sense of I've done the right thing, and without it, there might have been a completely different outcome, and that has a massive impact on someone. I know it did for me, and because I think you reflect on what the other side, the darker side of what could have happened. Like if they hadn't made the phone call, if the abandoned call wasn't responded to, if the patrol people hadn't sent us there, if when we got there we didn't work as a team so efficiently. Like within 30 seconds, there could have been a completely different outcome.
Yeah.
And for me, that just thinking about that and reflecting on that had quite a significant impact on me, for a very positive reason, actually.
Right. Yeah. 100%. So you start there, but then you end up going to the London Fire Brigade. When did you make that transfer over to London?
Yeah, so we had a strike in like 2002 for pay, and which I agreed with actually, and I went on strike in East Sussex. But I got married in '99, and then we had our first child in 2001, and I was coming down from London, staying a couple of days to undertake my duty. But I just found once I had my little boy, I found that very difficult. And that the plan was always to go back to London. It's just that the team was so great in East Sussex and Hove and Brighton that it's a difficult thing to then arrange. But of course, then the sort of love for my kid and my wife at the time meant I needed to shift and change. So then I went up to a much bigger organisation. East Sussex, is a much smaller fire brigade, very much like a little family. And then I kind of went into this big organisation, which had challenges, for me, because now all of a sudden I'm just like a number or a bag of sand or something like that. Whereas before we kind of all had to muck in and get involved to make things work. So I kind of had I was able to have a little more freedom in East Sussex. In London, it was a little bit more rigid. That's okay. It's just the nature of the organisation and the size of it, really.
Yeah. I know that in your bio you mentioned and you started talking about we were talking about this a little bit beforehand, driving fire appliances. So and for everybody listening out there, when we're mentioning an appliance here in the United States, we're usually talking about some kind of water application device. In the United Kingdom, an appliance is the engine, it's the pumper. It's the piece that they're taking. So you started driving the appliances. Kind of talk to me about that again a little bit, just because.
Yeah, so when I was in East Sussex, and part of being part of that initial watch, like a couple of people left, and the way it was managed was as people leave, then there's like a pecking order as other people come through, and so there was a driver vacancy, which they asked me would I like to fill, and I said yes. And generally in East Sussex, you do one day shift and then a night shift, and then the other 2 days you'd be at the back of the machine, either in breathing apparatus duty or as entry control. I know it's slightly different in the States, but and then when I moved to London, and they had such a shortage of drivers, I literally drove every day for 3 years before I went into training, going around to different stations and just getting to know the brigade. So initially I was on the Blue Watch, so I got to know everyone on the Blue Watch, and then I moved to the Green Watch at Chiswick, and I got to know everybody on the Green Watch, which was really good. And it's funny, the last 3 years of my career, 4 years of my career, I was on the Green Watch at North Kensington. So, there was still some old faces from back in the day.
Steve? What's the mindset of a driver, of an apparatus operator? What's it like in the London Fire Brigade? Because I know, like, we talk about it, and obviously even us, I'm going to say the tips from the left front seat, because our steering wheel's on the left side, but like for you guys, it's on the right. What are some of the things that you as a driver, developed in your mindset when you were operating, like tips, tricks, and just things you looked out for? Like, kind of walk me through that, because I'm just curious what it was like,
Well, I think the key is to drive the machine to arrive. So, like, if you're going really fast and then braking, so you're far better going at a slightly slower speed, but not braking as much.
Yeah,
you got a lot of water, a lot of momentum, and of course you've got people in the back sort of getting ready for the incident. So you want to kind of keep it as smooth as you possibly can. But I think it's really important to kind of look further up the road. This is something I used to do. I used to look further up the road. Of course, on a blue light, you do have, in the UK anyway, you get exemptions, so you have to give way at a red light. You're allowed to go on the other side of the road. You're allowed to exceed the speed limit.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it was like communicating to the oncoming traffic, or even the lane that I was going in, that I'm coming past you and I'm coming at speed, and I didn't want to do anything too rash where I'm moving in and out. It was trying to position myself where further down the line people could see what I was trying to do and create a pathway for me.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to brake too much, so I could kind of get there as quickly as I possibly could, because speed is of the essence, obviously.
Yep.
So yeah,
when you arrive on scene of fires, and I just want to ask this question because I remember this was a thing that a shout is considered a fire.
Yeah, shout is like the call. The call is basically,
okay.
The call comes in, the bells go, we go off. That's basically a shout. Someone. I think it's old sort of school thing from back in the day when there was no, there was no telephones or way of communicating. People would shout like fire, and it would sort of run down to anybody could have help. Literally getting buckets of water in the community to do. So it kind of comes from that with a bit of history.
Right. It's good to see the tradition and culture is still there. When you arrive on the scene of a building fire as a driver, what are the things that you're thinking of? To kind of take me through your process on a bread and butter operation.
Yeah, well, the first thing is we're looking at wind direction, so which way's the smoke going, and it's trying to position the appliance where you can kind of fend off so there's no traffic coming in the way, but also if there's any things like backdraft or flashover which could impede the progress of anybody going in the building. Like you don't want to be in a situation where there's a backdraft and the machine is right by the front door. So we'd normally sort of push away. The second appliance would come in through the back, but leave plenty of room for any ladders that needed to come off. So there was a little bit of a gap, but close enough that it's people can we can run out hose easy. We can get the BA crews into where we need to get to quite quickly. And sometimes, on a very, very rare occasion, it sometimes has to be a redeployment. But if you get it right, that doesn't necessarily happen. So it's a consideration every time, and that's just not fires. It's also with road traffic accidents. You just want to create a safe zone, so you're not having to move any appliance or anything like that.
Were you the kind of, I know there's apparatus operators that drive the rig and they pump it and that's it. I know when I was on the line, I was always the guy that my lines went out, my hose lines went out, I got the pressure set, but I was also looking for work, whether it was to throw a ladder or were you that kind of aggressive firefighter from the standpoint of not only did you have the appliance handled, but you were also supporting the fireground operation as well?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because you're at the back of the machine and you're operating the pump. So my first priority was ensuring there's a water supply, always.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like making sure that the hose is coming from the tank, but also that we've plugged into a hydrant. Now, once that's happened, and I'm running at a set pressure, I'm kind of happy, and then I can start supplementing other roles on the ground. But I'll never go too far really from the fire appliance.
Right.
I need to be kind of at least I can see what's happening if there's any problems.
Yeah.
So yeah. I mean, I would help because sometimes you're resource light, and you have to kind of do that sort of stuff. But similarly, I mean, when I was a driver, I would have been a firefighter then, and not in a situation where I was making any assessment of risk or any problems. So yeah, just setting up everything ready for the rest of the cavalry to turn up. Sometimes, yeah, I definitely would help with that. I think it's just about being proactive, but being safe and doing the right thing.
Yeah,
and I think that was the key, really.
100%, and that's where I was kind of getting at, because even though we're thousands of miles apart, our jobs and we have different tactics, we have different appliances and apparatus. At the core of what you're doing, you described what a good engine operator here in the United States is doing, right? Getting that water going, getting that secondary water supply, and then supporting the operation from there, and having the mindset, and including proper positioning and everything else, and thinking about, hey, what's the second engine going to do? What's and I think one of the things too is just that it's an opinion of there's not as many aerial appliances or ladder trucks that I would see in maybe the fire department of New York, or even here where I work up in the Poughkeepsie area. But you're still a ladder culture of getting the ladders off the pumper and doing what we consider truck work, right? But you're getting ladders up. I know every time I see a picture of a fire in London, I'm seeing this culture of this ladder culture that's there as well. So it's kind of neat to see that, we're different, but we're the same.
Yeah. I mean, one of the other duties as a driver, normally everyone's they've left the fire truck or the appliance, as we call it. And you're kind of there on your own. So all the equipment's there. So if someone needs equipment, you can quickly just get it off as someone comes to get it. So it's a case of just being alert, listening to the radio, finding out what's going on, just having a really good situational awareness, and sometimes you can be a little bit more remote from the actual incident. It just sometimes it works like that. But you need to kind of still be aware of what's going on, and I think that's key.
You spent time training new recruits, and what was the most rewarding work about working in firefighter development, working with new firefighters and doing training?
Yeah, I found it extremely rewarding to take someone who's just come off the street with an enthusiasm and a want to do something, but actually shift not only their core skills but their behaviour. So when they go to station, they're kind of all singing and all dancing, so to speak. Actually, that was one of the things I used to say on the very first day. I used to run down the line and ask people if they were they singers or were they dancers, and just to have a bit of a laugh. But you get singers and then you get dancers, and then I'd say to them, the singers need to help the dancers out, and the dancers need to help the singers out. So by the time you finish your 17-week course, you'll be all singing and all dancing like me and the trainer, So yeah. So it was a bit of fun, but but with a message behind it. But to see people really kind of struggle with certain core skills and work really, really hard, and like it was a combination of waking up early, working hard throughout the day, having to learn some stuff, pass exams. The sense of achievement that was there at the end for them was exceptional, and
Yeah.
I was so pleased when they got it, and for me to be able to put my name on them was really important, you know.
Yeah.
And I set some high standards. I'm not going to lie, you know. If I wasn't going to let you through because you know you were a nice person. You know, if you're going to go to a fire station and people are going to rely on you, and if they're not going to rely on you because of skills, then really you should have had some extra training. And some, you know, it's not that they struggle. It's just that sometimes there'd be a certain part of their development that you know that they might have an issue with. One of the things that I found actually was I used to get a lot of people recoursed into my course. We were lucky in London Fire Brigade. Sometimes every 30 or 35 courses going through with like 16 firefighters. And so sometimes you'd get someone who'd recoursed where they had a problem with their development. And one of them would be knot tying. You know, they'd struggle with their knots, particularly when they're under pressure on the fireground or the drill ground. And they just struggled. And then what I realised was actually that a lot of them were left-handed. And they were being shown how to tie the knot right-handed. You know, so the trainer would show them right-handed, but they couldn't do it because I suppose they're cat-handed in that respect.
Yeah.
But they're actually left-handed. So I adapted the training session. I never used the word left or right. I'd always use dominant, non-dominant hand. I'd always put the left-handers with the right-handers. I learned to tie the knots both left-handed and right-handed. Yeah, and I had no problem with that. So it's a little bit about kind of looking at the bigger picture, you know, and that just sort of happened by accident. That you know, because you could see they were trying to do stuff with their left hand, but they were showing it right-handed, and they were all over the place.
Yeah.
And even the notes were right-handed; they weren't left-handed.
Yeah.
Which was really really weird. But yeah, just an assumption by a right-handed person that everyone's going to tie that knot the way that they do it when they write the note or they train, and actually it's not necessarily like that.
Well, and I think it's so, you know, that's such a great point because in the fire service, we do instruction, we go from the known to the unknown. And it's always like, and you use that example of, you know, singers and dancers before. And like, this is it's refreshing. Like it's just another thing that's refreshing to hear. It's different, but it's the same. So, yeah.
Yeah. You know, like everybody's got something to bring, but also they've also got slight differences within themselves, and I think that's the one thing I kind of valued when I was actually in charge of the Green Watch at North Kensington. We had a real mixture of watch, really diverse, all the way across the board, and
yeah,
actually as a result, you know, we did really really well. Like we had a cultural review about like behaviour within London Fire Brigade, and actually they came to our station onto our watch, and we were like an exemplar watch. That's what the standard that everybody could have wanted. So I was really proud of that, and actually that every single one of them, you know, and that's been included. Every single one of them held everybody to account.
Yeah, and that's.
And if things don't get done, they call someone out, but not in a bad way, you know. And actually they created their own positive culture, which was excellent. You know, it was really good to see.
Yeah, kind of. I want to dive into the Grenfell Tower incident here and shift gears for a second. So June 14th of 2017, the London Fire Brigade starts to take calls for a fire at Grenfell Tower, and kind of walk us through this incident, because you wrote very powerfully about your connection to the Grenfell community, and because you lost a friend in this, like.
Yeah, so first of all, it was a red watch jobs, and I was on the white watch at the time. So I came off duty that morning. Mm-hmm. Blue watch took over during the day shift, and then red watch went on in the night shift. So there were a load of calls. It was at 1 o'clock in the morning that all the fire started to happen. I know the red watch really well because when I was at Kensington, I was in charge of the Kensington because of one appliance. You know Kensington because you've been
Yep.
there. And so I was on. That's how I got to know Bill as well. But I was on the road, so I knew a lot of the guys, and I do a standby at North Kensington as well. So I knew a lot of them. So that night I went to bed, and in the morning my phone was alight with messages. Like, so I sort of get up about 6:30. Are you okay? Are you at the fire? And I was like, so I turned the news on straight away. I honestly couldn't believe what I was seeing. I go past those. Grenfell's like one of 5 towers. It's the only one that they put ACM cladding around for whatever reason. I don't know, but they did. And if you told me when I was a kid, I was brought up in North Kensington, I used to walk down Goulburn Road, Portobello Road, past North Kensington Fire Station as I crossed the road to go to my school. I did that every day. And the school I went to was an all-boys Catholic school. There was a guy called Ernie Vital, and he died in the fire. He was in the Grenfell Tower. Now, amongst my cohort of friends, we got a WhatsApp group, and we still meet up regularly for a drink. Like, that kind of hits hard, because we were all in kind of, I suppose, like council social housing. You know, we were all allocated. It was a different place back then.
Yep.
When we were growing up, North Kensington and around the areas has very much got very gentrified. But back then, it's like high Irish population, Portuguese, Spanish, but also it was a place where you had a lot of sort of Afro-Caribbean culture from the Windrush, and that's where the carnival happens every year in London. So massively diverse, I would say probably poor, demographic. And for us, we're like, well, hang on here, we could have been allocated that house in Grenfell. It's only, the luck of someone not putting us in that place that might have been a problem. So when we heard that Ernie died, it was, it was a bit of a shock for us, really. We're like, oh my God, and of course then you've got the impact of all of that. 72 people dying,
right?
And one of your friends have died. And of course you've got, for me, there's 3 aspects to this. You've got the 72 people that died, and their direct family and friends, and I'm kind of included in that a little bit because Ernie died, right? And then you've got the wider community who were directly involved, saw something on the night, and those that didn't, but like the next following days, and that's me included, like just seeing this charred remain of this huge tower, knowing what's happened, right? And then you've got the first responders that attended, so that the police, the ambulance, the fire. And of course, on each 3 of those, I've got a buy-in. And that's where it's been quite difficult. And I've got a friend, she's a teaching assistant in the local school. It's actually the school I do a bit of outreach with for my ride, and actually they've done some artwork. And they've done some nice pictures here for me, which is going to be stuck on my bicycle when I'm going around the world. But they lost a child in the fire. But she works there, and her block is literally right opposite the Grenfell. And hearing her talk about some of the stories was like, hearing people shouting at upper levels for help and seeing people jump. It was it's really tough.
For those listening, the Grenfell Tower was a 24-story residential high-rise built in 1974, and it was renovated in 2016. And they put a cladding on the side that was aluminum composite material with a polyethylene core, and it's one of those things like everything else that they sell. It's if you put a match to it, it wouldn't exactly light, but once it gets going, it cannot stop. And the Guardian, if you look on YouTube and type in the Guardian Grenfell Tower, they linked footage from cell phones from the initial start of the fire up until a few minutes, and you can just this is a fire like no other. And if you have a building in your first due area that is a high rise that has this cladding on it, cladding. I keep saying cladding. Take note, and for us in the United States, this happened in Atlantic City at the Borgata. They had something similar on the side, and it burnt so fast that debris fell down and blocked apparatus coming into the incident. They kept it on the outside of the building because it was only done on one side of the building. So there was very minor extension as a result of that, because it was, for the Borgata, it was aesthetically pleasing for the casino. But it's just something to note there.
I think with the Grenfell, the residents weren't happy that these renovations were taking place, and
Yeah.
it wasn't just the cladding going on; it was actually the standard of work that was happening.
Right.
Like, for instance, like one of the local fire stations did an inspection, which is what happens anyway for some buildings, just to make sure familiarisation.
Mm-hmm.
And they realised that the contractors had cut the dry riser pipe, and they were like, "Why have you done that? Like, we won't be able to get access to." And it goes, "Oh, it's just in the way. We need to get through here." And it's like, "No, you need." And so then there was a push. You need to get this done. It needs to be done today. You need to check that whatever you're doing, you need to get this sorted because it's putting people at risk. But there was also like the manufacturers of the ACM cladding lied about its fire retardant properties,
right?
And they kind of they lied about actually how flammable it was. That's all part of the inquiry, and that's all come out, which came out just after the 7th anniversary of the fire last year. So it's been really, really difficult. It's been really, really difficult, and it's 8 years on the 14th of June, which is a day that I leave on my bike ride, and that was quite significant for me that I left on that particular day.
Yeah.
But there's been 72 deaths. There's been 8 years passed. There's been 102 recommendations by the inquiry, and there's been no prosecutions at all.
Right.
And the sad thing is, I'm going to get on my bike and I'm going to leave on 11 o'clock on the 14th of June. So that's not too long. That's like a couple of days' time. And I'm going to cycle my bike around the world, and I'm going to be back. And the only number that's going to significantly change there will be, instead of it being 8 years, it's going to be nearly 10 years. And it just goes to show how glacial the justice system is in this country. And I know the Grenfell Foundation, this is part of me trying to raise money for the youth projects in my local community to try and create a bit of a legacy for them, really. They're trying to push to get justice, and to get away from this two-tier system of, you've got corporates that have got lawyers and money, and their decisions are affecting what people do. And when there's an error, they try and sweep stuff under the carpet. So there's a massive push for that. And in the UK, we've had quite a few incidents. We had the Hillsborough disaster 30 years ago, where at a football match where a load of people got crushed but the police lied about it. We've had the blood scandal where infected blood was given to people and they knew about it. Where we've got this post office thing that's happening at the moment where they were told that they were stealing money, but it was a computer error and no one was. They were prosecuting people. Of course, we've got the Grenfell thing, and it's just one thing after another. And so the Grenfell Foundation are looking to have a situation where whenever the government come up with an inquiry, which does take millions of pounds, by the way, and recommendations are made, that those recommendations are actually brought through by an independent body.
Right.
And just going back to the Grenfell fire, just to kind of go full circle here, there was a fire in Camberwell, right, a few years before the Grenfell fire, where there was ACM cladding. And there was, I think it was I'm not too sure how many people died, but there was fatalities. And there was an inquiry and there were recommendations. And none of the recommendations were put in place. And if they were, the Grenfell fire would never have happened. And so it's this call for why are you having an inquiry if the outcome of this inquiry gives you action plans basically, and you're not willing to kind of move them forward. And, yeah.
And for us as firefighters, we're problem solvers. So when we have the answer and the solution to the problem, and it's not, that's extremely frustrating.
So particularly with the Grenfell fire, you just feel helpless. We can deal with compartment fires in high-rise buildings all day, but I've never seen a whole building alight.
Right. Yeah.
And I put myself in Michael Dowden's position, who was in charge of the Red Watch, because I'm in charge of the Green Watch. I'm in exactly the same role as he is, and he'd put in all the procedures to deal with the compartment fire. But once it had gone out the window and hit the ACM, well, that was it. It was a train out of control on the tracks, and there's no way it was going to get stopped.
Right.
And then it's bogged down with procedure, and sort of standard operating procedures, and that's when the sort of problems happen. And you're right, we want to do. I go to work. I don't want to make any. I want to help people. I want
Yeah.
to do my best. I want to solve problems. If you can't do that, and it happens, right? It happens. Sometimes the outcome isn't favourable. It does hit you hard as a first responder, and also, like, for me, like, talking to people in the community, like, they're expecting firefighters to undertake certain stuff, and they're just watching it, and they feel helpless.
Right.
So that's really where this drive for me doing this bike ride really comes from.
Yeah,
You know,
I would imagine that, and it's one of my questions here is that, the fire affected the mental health of the North Kensington firefighters and firefighters all throughout London who participated in the event. But it also affected the community. And what was like, what the aftermath of that? What was the mental health support like with each other? Because I mean, this was a devastating.
the community responded. I remember because I went down there the next day. I mean, obviously, as a civilian, I wasn't on duty. They don't call you in especially for stuff like that. There's enough resources in London, but there were things like people were donating clothes and food in the local community centre. The response was immense. There was a load of people who would come down to try and just support the local community, and every month they had a silent walk in the initial stages where they would just walk around on a prescribed route, like with green flags, because green is the colour of the Grenfell cause, just in silence. And they do that every month, just to kind of like say, look, this was a tragedy. This wasn't a good thing that's happened.
Right.
And we want to remember these people, because like, for every reason, we told you there was going to be problems with the build. We said there's a high likelihood of there being a fire. Then there was a fire, and the outcome wasn't great, and it's affected a lot of people. And the community just came together to try and get over that. And that silent walk was really powerful. I mean,
Yeah.
You had hundreds, and in the early stages, it was thousands of people just walking the streets, and it was absolutely quiet. And actually, they do the silent walk now annually, and on the 14th of June. So I leave in the morning. My old watch are there on that day, so they'll be the guard of honour that we normally go either side of the street, and they walk past us. So it's our kind of way of just honouring the 72 lives that tragically couldn't make it out of that building on that night.
Now, I know you said you were off duty when the fire broke out, but you later supported the investigation teams. What was your role, and what was it kind of like in that?
It was very insignificant. Like, so what happens is you then go on release, as you know. So in the initial stages, my other appliance, because I was in a different fire station, and I was quite far away. I was in a Twickenham fire station, which is out towards the west. It's right on the border of Surrey, and we've got quite a big station ground. And Surrey have had a load of cuts, so we were kind of supporting there. So we weren't called initially, but after about 3 weeks, when the fire had died down and there was fire investigation, they'd always send a couple of trucks there to just be on standby, just in case anything happened. And I was just in that role.
Okay.
And so I was sitting on the outer cordon, just like communicating to the fire safety guys. They didn't want us in the building for whatever reason, but if anything happened, or if there was an issue, then we were there for them, really.
Gotcha.
So yeah, it was, in some ways, like, people ask me, was I at the Grenfell? And I'm kind of glad I wasn't there. I'd got too much of a buy-in with the local community and what was going on, and hearing some of the stories that were happening on the night. It's an incident that you kind of wish you were there to help out, but actually, like, you would have been in that situation where you would have just been rendered almost useless in your head, and that would have been, I think that would have been really tough for me personally. So in some ways, I kind of look at myself as I was quite fortunate, really.
My wife is I met my wife at a party, a Christmas party initially for, she was working as an EMT in the ambulance, and she's not a firefighter, but when the Grenfell fire happened, I obviously had quite the reaction, reached out to check on Billy, and just as a firefighter was shocked at how quickly this fire spread. When we went on our honeymoon, and it was 2020 when we went down into January of 2020, when we went into London, and her reaction to seeing the tower, because the tour guide pointed it out, and it's very, like, I just seeing the tower itself, knowing you guys, like, it affected us. And my wife, they had the covering over it, with the green heart and stuff, but you could still see the damage, and to know that whole building was involved in fire, it affected her in that moment. Like, she was literally breathtaking.
It is a bit of a landmark in the area, because no matter where you are, you see it. I take I go around Westbourne Park, and I'm heading towards Portobello Road, and of course you're on a slight hill, and you just see the heart in the distance. But one of the things, like, it took them a while to skin that building. Mm-hmm. Before that, all you saw was the charred remains of the outside of the ACM cladding, and that was tough. That was tough seeing that. There's a really powerful, like, documentary arts film that's done by, like, a black film director, Steve McQueen, who's also lived in North Kensington. It's a 24-minute sort of film, very powerful, and at the moment it's going around the country. So it was in Cardiff. It's now going to go to Belfast. It was in Glasgow before that.
Yeah.
So it's doing its travels. But also, I think in the next week or two, I think there's a Netflix documentary about the Grenfell Tower. It's coming out on Netflix. Okay. So I would urge anybody who wants to know a little bit about what it was all about to go and watch that.
So that and this kind of leads us into, like, you retire in October of 2024 after 28 years of service, and now in retirement you are doing this tower to tower bike ride, and Grenfell is definitely an inspiration for it. Tell us about this.
Well, like I say, the three aspects for me is the 72 people that died, and I knew one of them, and so I can empathise with all the other friends and family of the people that died that day. The second point is, how it's affected the community who directly saw something on the night, and those that didn't, who still have friends and family around the area, and having to deal with that, and I'm one of those. And also about the first responders, the police, the ambulance, and the fire. Of course, I can empathise with what went on with that. So on every level, there's that buy-in for me. Mm-hmm. And also the West Lancaster estate where the Grenfell Tower is in. It's a place where you've got disadvantaged children that are living there, and as the area, and as Kensington is one of the richest boroughs probably in the whole world, I would imagine, in relation to property and the people that live there. The kids that live on the West Lancaster estate, they're kind of been left behind a little bit, And so for me, it was like, I remember and empathise with what it was like when I was growing up in that area as a kid, and the government have cut a load of, like, youth projects, and and there's been a lot of sort of money saving, austerity. And for me, when I was growing up, like, youth clubs were a brilliant resource for me. It was I could get involved in stuff, and it was a bit of an escape from my world. And so for me, it's like, well, let's try and move something forward, and try and raise a little bit of money for some of the youth projects in the area. So there's like a boxing club, there's a football club, there's a couple of youth clubs in the area. There's also some schools. So my plan is to raise £30,000, which is basically £1 for every kilometre that I ride, and just funnel in money over a period of years to these organisations just to kind of help the kids out, really. And so I did a bit of outreach in one of the schools, and Yeah, they've been brilliant. Like I say, they've got these stickers. They made this bit of artwork which I've got down to these little stickers, and they're going to be stuck on my bike. And they're absolutely brilliant. And they've named my bike as well. They named my bike, and they called it the Justice Express. So there's this call for justice and the Express, which is me moving forward around the globe. But also, come on, let's get things moving there a little bit. And here is my little logo. So I've got a little patch. And what I'm going to do, every fire station I visit is going to get a patch so they can stick it on their patch board, which would be really nice.
How can fire stations along your journey support you? Like, you're hoping to visit, stay overnight, connect with crews. Like, what are the things that they can do? How can the brotherhood?
Well, I think every fire station is different, but also, like, if however they can help me out. So if they can give me a bed for the night, that would be great. If they want to offer us a bit of messing, that'd be fantastic, and some food. Even if they kind of want to guide us to a certain place where, staying or camping would be really good. And just sort of spread the name about a bit, and just like get a little bit of publicity, and and help me raise the money that I need. I've been really fortunate, actually. I haven't even gone yet, and I'm already nearly at £8,000. So I'm well past the 25% of my target. So I'm really, really pleased with the response so far. And so like anyone can like follow my challenge. If you go on the website, follow my challenge, there's a tab on live maps, and on there you'll see Steve Aslin, Grenfell, and if you just click on that, you'll know exactly where I am anywhere in the world. I won't be in America for a while, but when I do, I'm definitely going to be looking at every place I stop. Or every town that I go through, if the fire station's open, or if it's not, I'll take a photograph. If it's open, I'll stop and try and take a picture with the on-duty watch or team that's on. I've got a flag with, like, Grenfell tower to tower cycle across the world, and this artwork watermarked into it. So I'm hoping to document that and take a picture, and just maybe sort of like create a little booklet of the places that I've visited and the watches that I've done. I think this ride is really, really important for me in relation to going to different fire stations around the world.
Yeah.
Because I think the Grenfell fire, and we talked about like the commonality of what being a firefighter is all about. I think every single firefighter in the whole world, when they saw that incident, they were like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. And why did it happen? And they're asking a load of questions, and they're actually putting themselves in that situation.
I remember one video clip from an appliance that was responding and they could see the tower, and and I just remember like putting myself in that firefighter's shoes.
So exactly the same.
Yeah.
And that's the Westway. So that's like an elevated roadway which runs from east to west London, and you have to kind of go on there to get access from other parts of London to that area. It's just a quick way of doing it.
Yeah.
And it's not they're videoing it, but it's what they're saying inside the cab.
Yes.
Like, oh my God,
yes,
what's happening here? How's this happened? How are we going to tackle this? It's like, and it's that anticipation before you get there. Like, what are we preparing ourselves for here? Because you know what it's like.
Yeah.
How many times do we're going down the road and we can see smoke in the distance, and straight away it's like, okay, we've got a goer here. Something's happening. We need to get ready. We're up. We're here running. We need to get ready. We need to get the BA sorted. Everyone then goes on high alert.
Right. But we don't expect to see a 24-story high-rise involved from the fourth floor to the top, and that was what took my heart. My heart stopped, and the breath. I was just like, like that.
You may expect to see fire out of a window and a load of smoke, but when you actually see the whole building alight, it's like your thoughts really do go out to the people that are inside the building. I mean, you hear some of the survivor stories actually of them actually getting out. That even they're quite horrific,
Yeah. So we've definitely hit on the Grenfell Tower fire and what you're doing with this foundation and getting the money. Your goal is 30,000. You're well on the way with £8,000 already. Certainly, I'm hoping that when you start, when are you planning to, when are your feet on the ground here in the United States?
So, like I said, I'm hoping to be in New York 15 months after I leave, and I've got a 90-day visa. So, and I'm going to see my sister in Philadelphia. So, I'm probably looking September, so 3 months, June. So it'll be about a year after I leave the UK. I'm hoping to be
Yep.
landing in the West Coast.
Okay. All right. So that's and that so it'll be a year from June 17th of this year.
June the 14th.
June
Yeah,
the
roughly
14th.
about a
Sorry.
year, give or take. Give or take. Yeah.
June the 14th. Yes. All right.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. I'm thinking of 2017 there. Let's get myself a little dyslexic there. So the 14th. So okay. So we're looking. Yeah. All right. That's good to know because we can kind of prep people for this. And I know that when it comes to your family, you have family legacy in the fire service and historic ties to.
Yeah. So when I was training, it was at Southwark Training Centre, which has been the training centre for the fire brigade since its inception, really, in 1866. And when it was the Metropolitan Fire Brigade. And there was the Metropolitan Board of Works that was born out of the sort of Victorian vision of trying to make London a better place. So they were responsible for the sewer systems, trying to make sure there was good water, that there was a good fire response. And so that was generated. Now, when I was going through my ancestry, I just had a little. I saw on one of the census that there was this. My great uncle, might even be another great uncle, William Aslin, was in the census, was housed up in St Pancras in a firehouse there. I was kind of okay. This is Metropolitan Fire Brigade, and he's just here with his wife Blanche. So I'd done a bit of digging, and so I went to where I was trained. They had a little museum there. So I went to the curator of the museum, the Southwark Training Centre, and I'd go past these old fire appliances with just hand pumps, and there was another one with a little steam coal thing underneath. Did you go to Southwark Training Centre when you were in London?
No.
The sort of training centre. So you got all these old sort of fire appliances, and I would just walk past them. But then when I had a chat with the curator, I asked, would you happen to have the fire record of like my great uncle? And she went, yeah, we have. And he did 26 and a half years. Now what you got to remember is there's no radios, there's no BA, there's it's horse drawn, there's no pumps or anything like this.
Right.
So it then begs the question, like, how did they do it? How did they do all of this stuff? So it's interesting because where do you recruit people for this? Well, before it became the Metropolitan Fire Brigade, before 1866, it was the London Fire Engineers Establishment that was created by a guy called John Braywood, who was the chief fire officer in Glasgow that was brought down to London. And he had the responsibility of creating the fire service in and around London. And what he did was he wanted a disciplined workforce, but also sort of would do what they were told, and they kind of knew a little bit about fire. So he went to the Navy, because obviously you're on the ship, you have to put fires out, you're on a watch, you're looking out for stuff, you have a shift system with that.
Yes.
And so he recruited from the Navy, and I found out that like my GGGG uncle was actually in the Navy, and he was signed up for 10 years, but he only did 8, and he was shifted then out to this London Fire Engineers Establishment. And unfortunately, John Braywood died in a fire in Tooley Street, which is just at the southern end of London Bridge. And it was a massive parade for his funeral and stuff. And then Sir Massey Shaw then took over the organisation, and that's when it became the Metropolitan Fire Brigade. And what's really nice about Massey Shaw, and I'm not too sure, you'll know about his legacy everywhere you go when you go to the theatre, because theatres in London, they were all lit up with oil lamps or gas. There was no electricity back in the day. So if there was any kind of thing that was happening on the stage, if there was a fire, it would then affect the audience and vice versa. So he was instrumental in sorting the fire curtain out,
Oh, okay.
fire safety. So whenever you go to a theatre and you know there's a fire curtain, it's because of Sir Massey Shaw. And so that's a really interesting point. But what was really nice, when I got William's record, he did 26 and a half years, like,
Wow.
with no BA or anything like that. He had a couple of disciplinaries because he didn't keep the fire burning on the steam engine,
Right.
and I think he showed a little bit of disobedience at one point as well. But his record was signed off by Sir Massey Shaw, and it was a real honour when I found that out. And I'd been going past these engines, and Sir Massey Shaw had his offices at Southwark Training Centre, and then you kind of think, well, how did they do all this stuff? Well, it was literally people standing on top of towers just looking for smoke.
Yeah.
And then they would shout down. There's a fire. And then they'd get the horses and they'd go off. So, yeah. And then when you kind of dig into the kind of way they operated, things like, well, you got horse-drawn carriage and you're just carrying people to put the fire out. Where's the ladders go? You need ladders. And then you find that they were put on street corners sort of during the night where there's no one walking around. But during the day, they were left in churchyards, parish yards, and there would have to be a firefighter that would have to stay there, look after the ladders so they wouldn't get damaged, and that's how they dealt with it. So yeah, really interesting when you find out some of the challenges that they had back then, and how much like technology has moved forward actually to make us much safer. Unbelievable.
I think it's interesting the connection with the Navy, because I know for the American Fire Service, we saw huge standardizations after World War II with a lot of influx of veterans coming back from the Navy, and that's where we saw the Rockwood nozzles and stuff like that really take precedence in the fire service. And then even, I believe, one of Brannigan's, who, in the American Fire Service, wrote the books on everything. One of his first books was about naval ship firefighting. So like this root of Navy firefighting and how it relates back to the American Fire Service, and now learning about it in the United Kingdom is kind of interesting to me to see that these worlds have crossed over just in different time frames. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, even our drill, even our marching and our saluting is all naval. It's all naval drill.
Yeah.
Everything is about the Navy, and it's no coincidence actually that there's a very high proportion of ex-Navy personnel that come into the fire service, because they, like, even in modern day, they learn how to put out fires on the ship, and they do like fire training while they're on the vessel. So it's an easy jump from when they come out, of being serving the country to actually then being the fire brigade. So yeah.
So, closing out, some final thoughts. What message would you have for firefighters today, both those serving and those who are about to enter the fire service?
I would say go to work and just be as professional as you possibly can. Try and learn everything you can. And so when it's your time, it's about being prepared. You've been prepared all the time. So when you're called, you know exactly what needs to happen. And really embrace your team members so you can really work together as a team. You might not necessarily like them, but it's not about that. It's about how you work well with them. And if you can get on really well, really understand everybody's differences and how everybody functions, everybody is better that way. And ultimately, we serve a community, and for me, it's like, no matter how rich you are, how poor you are, we're just looking to try and keep people safe.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's, if you've always got that at the forefront of your mind, that it's not about going to work and getting a paycheck. It's a little bit more in the fire service. I think this is the real understanding that we all have. It's like, it's not about the money, because actually, do we get paid as much? No. If we were someone else, no, we don't. We do it for a very, very good reason, and that's to help people out every single day. That's one of the things that I have struggled a little bit with since I've retired. The knowledge that every day I go to work, I know I'm going to help someone out.
Right.
So I still try and do that when I'm retired, but because I'm not having that direct relationship with the community. So, and this is where my bike ride is kind of helping out. It's sort of I'm doing it a little bit more indirectly, but it sort of still gives me that kind of focus. But and when I come back from my bike ride, I'm sure that I'll be doing something that's going to go down those sort of lines.
Right.
Whether it's going to be into sort of training to enhance someone's capability, or go back into teaching, or do some coaching, or maybe do some fire safety, whatever it is. Just in a situation where I can sort of feel like I'm making a difference to individuals. I think that's a real powerful thing for me.
Yeah. How can people follow you and get a hold of you to support your mission in this bike ride?
Okay, so if you want to follow me on Instagram, that's brilliant. It's just my name, so it's at Stephen, and that's Stephen Aslin, Aslin. And I've got a link tree on there, and it's got my Strava, which is my daily rides. If you want to buy me a coffee and support me along the route, that would be great. I've also got my Just Giving page on there. So if you feel like you need to donate, that would be great. And it will have, I haven't done it yet, but it will have my Follow My Challenge link on there. If you want to just go on the Just Giving website and just type in Stephen Aslin, you'll get go to the donation page. If you just want to go on the Follow My Challenge website, if you go to the live maps, then look for Grenfell Tower to Tower and Stephen Aslin, and you'll be able to link to the live tracker that I'll be carrying with me on my bike, and you'll know exactly where I am in the world.
Awesome.
So if you want to donate, that'd be fantastic. If you want to just connect with me on Instagram or on Messenger, that'd be really, really nice. If you want to come for a little, if I'm passing through and you want to join me for a couple of kilometres, or 2 or 3 or 10 or 100, then please, get in contact. I'd really appreciate the company and the support along the route. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, Steve, thank you for taking the time to sit with me today. I know we figured out the time difference, and then I had gotten hung up with work on our first interview date, so I apologize for that. But I greatly appreciate you taking the time out to tell me your story and about what you're doing here. I can't wait to track and follow you along your journey. And certainly when you get here in the States, I'm excited to see you in person. So we will definitely be, meeting up in a year's time for sure. And, I'm excited for it and I can't wait. So thank you for being here. Is there?
Well, thank you very much for having the opportunity for me to talk about my challenge and my career. I've really enjoyed it. Yeah. So thank you very much, Rob.
Hang out for a second here. I'm going to do our outro. Everybody, this is Rob from National Fire Radio's Frontline Mindset. Steve Aslin today talking about his project with the Grenfell Foundation and the tower to tower ride that he's doing across the world. His goal is to raise 30,000 pounds or $30,000 for us who are trying to figure out how he's going to carry 30,000 pounds with him through the United States. But it's check him out, get on Instagram, follow him, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you everybody for being here, and we'll see you at the next episode. This is Rob, Frontline Mindset.
National Fire Radio.